Yeah.
An awesome God he
Got 'em.
reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God.
Let's go.
Hey friends, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of Chaotic Serenity. So today, I want to tell you guys a story about a carpenter's assistant, right? So I know this guy who back in the day, he was kind of an aspiring carpenter, right? He worked for a professional carpenter, and he was sort of his assistant, handyman, kind of apprentice, if you will, right? He did, odd jobs and did some of the more simple things that were involved with the carpentry business. So this carpenter, he was old school, right? He didn't use the nail guns, and he liked to use a hammer and a nail. So when he was ready to hammer some stuff, he would just put the nail up, just nail it in. Hammer it in. So anyways, this guy became so proficient, this carpenter. He was so proficient with his hammer and his nail that he could put the nail down on, whatever piece of wood that he was getting ready to hammer. And he would be bringing the hammer down, and at the same time, he would be moving his hand and just letting the nail stand there. But it was so quick that it almost looked like one fluid motion. So he would let go of the nail as the hammer was coming down, and then bam, just with one smack, the nail would go all the way in. And so his little assistant was just kind of in awe of this guy's ability to pound a nail in with just one fell swoop, right? So the apprentice, the helper, the assistant decided, you know what, I want to learn how to do that. I'm going to do that. That is like the coolest thing ever, and I'm going to practice and practice till I get it. So this guy would practice. He would hold the nail up, and then he would bring the hammer down, and sometimes he would hit the nail, right? But more often than not, he would hit his thumb. Sometimes he'd hit his forefinger, right? But usually he would hit his thumb because he either would not be getting his hand out of the way in time, or he just wouldn't come down with the hammer directly on the head of the nail. It would be off by, just a little bit. And so the carpenter notices that the helper is, having some trouble. And he says, look, let me give you a piece of advice. And so, of course, the guy who keeps whacking his thumb says, yeah, how do you do it? I can't figure it out. I've practiced and practiced, and I keep having the same problem. So the carpenter says, you got to keep your eyes on the nail, because whatever you're looking at is naturally what that hammer is going to tend to come down on. Are you looking at the nail when you bring the hammer down? And so the assistant, the helper, whatever you want to call him, he said, well, no, I'm so concerned that the hammer's going to hit my thumb that I'm focusing my attention on my thumb, in such a way that hopefully if I'm paying attention to where my thumb is, I'll be able to miss my thumb. But it was sort of backfiring on him, right? Kind of like, you ever hear somebody coach kids playing baseball and says, hey, keep your eye on the ball. Excuse me, when the ball is coming, you want to keep your eye on the ball as you swing. You don't want to take your eye off the ball and look at the bat, for example, because then that's going to interfere with your aim. So my point in this little story, which is a true story, by the way, my point in this story is this. In order for that guy to really become a good carpenter and to learn how to smack that nail in with one smooth swing, he has to focus on the nail, right? But he was afraid that he was going to hit his thumb. So because of his fear, he was focusing more on trying to avoid what he was afraid of than he was focusing on trying to do the task at hand, i.e. focusing on the nail. And I think that we as humans, as imperfect creatures, that we can have the tendency to do the same thing when it comes to Jesus, when it comes to Christ, when it comes to God, right? I think that in this analogy, the nail is kind of like Jesus, right? For the carpenter, the nail is what he needs to be focusing on as he goes about doing his work, right? He doesn't need to be focusing on his thumb which is what he's afraid of. He's afraid of injuring his thumb. We need to be walking our walk and living our life focused with our eyes on Jesus and not with our eyes focused on the things that we are afraid of or the things that we may feel a little bit resentful about or things that we may be having a pity party about for ourselves, right? Y'all with me on that? I know that I have the tendency to, from time to time, think about the things in my life that are not working out the way that I envision them, right? I think about, this person should be doing that. Or, maybe my employer should be doing this, but they're not. Or, well, my friend should be doing this, but they're not. I focus on these things, and I take my focus, even if it's ever so briefly, I take my focus off Jesus. And when I do that, that starts to rob my joy and rob my hope, right? And then if I start thinking about things that I am afraid of, like, okay, well, what if I lose my job during the pandemic, or what if I speak up for Christ, but I'm persecuted or rejected by someone, or what if? I don't need to be focusing on these fears or these what seem to be unmet desires, right? I don't need to be focusing on my thumb and my forefinger in the analogy, right? In this parable, if you will. I need to be focusing on the nail, which is Jesus. And I think that this little story is also kind of extra funny. Not funny, but Jesus was a carpenter. So I wonder how he hammered nails in, right? Did he get it down to a science where he could just boop and just smash it in one good swing, or what? I wonder. But anyways, that's all I've got for y'all. So what I want to do is encourage you to ponder that, to think about that, to think about areas in your life where you may not be focusing on Jesus and you're focusing more on things that you're afraid of or potential trouble or the worries or anxiety of this world, right? Because just like with that nail and the hammer, if you focus on your thumb, that's where all your attention is going. And it's more likely that your thumb is going to get hit if you're focusing on it, right? If we focus on our fears and we focus on our anxiety and we focus on our worries, I think that there is a good chance or a better chance that those things may happen, or we may just freak ourselves out and cause problems in our own lives because we're so worried about them happening instead of just trusting Jesus and keeping our eye on the proverbial nail, right? So thanks for joining me. Appreciate y'all being here. It's always fun doing these Chaotic Serenity videos. And hey, until we meet again, deuces.